On June 4th, 1960, four teenagers would depart from their hometown of Vantaa, Finland, and drive 16 miles west to Lake Bodom in the city of Espoo, with the intention of camping along the shore. They pitched their tent on a peninsula along the southern shore. The next morning of June 5th, at around 6 a.m., a group of boys bird-watching west of the campsite would report hearing voices calling for help. They ventured closer to the four teenagers' campsite and would see a blond man walking from the scene heading south. They also noticed a collapsed tent and a pair of legs protruding from it. A fisherman west of the campsite around the same time would not report hearing calls for help, but did see a blond man walking southwards from the site as well. Around 11 a.m. that morning, a carpenter swimming near the peninsula would spot the collapsed tent and approach the scene, discovering the bodies. Police arrived on the scene shortly to discover four bodies. One of the teens, 18-year-old Nils Gustafsson, was alive but had suffered severe blunt force wounds to the back of his head and jaw. The other three were all killed from stabbing and blunt force trauma. Authorities concluded the attack seemed to have occurred between 4 and 6 a.m. The perpetrator had snuck up on the tent, cut its ropes, and bludgeoned and stabbed through the tent as the victims were asleep. Many of the victims' belongings were found scattered throughout the area. The attacker had taken the keys to the victims' motorcycles, but the motorcycles themselves had been left behind. Numerous suspects had been identified throughout the investigation, and this police sketch of the blonde suspect witnesses saw was released. Most public suspicion focused on Hans Osman, who lived near the shore of Lake Bodom, especially after this photo was taken. This was taken at the funeral of the victims and shows a man in the crowd who bears similarities to the description of the blonde man. No one at the funeral recalls seeing this man. Many people believe it to be Hans Osman. To this day, the Lake Bodom murders remain one of Finland's most infamous unsolved murders. In August 2005, police officers in Wailuku, Maui were searching for a male suspect believed to be involved in sexual attacks on elderly women in the area. Two of the attacks involved the suspect breaking and entering the victims' houses, and the other two occurred when the women were walking through Wailuku streets in the early hours of the morning. This was the sketch of the suspect police distributed. You may recognize it as it has become a symbol for the Aradas mystery, which was a theory about the existence of a computer algorithm used by companies worldwide as a form of mass surveillance. The Aradas mystery is a whole other rabbit hole of conspiracy theories in and of itself. If you want to learn more about it, I recommend checking out Nexpo or Blame It on George's videos about it. On June 11, 2010, an anonymous 4chan user shared this image to the website. The user describes in detail how frightening they find the image, and claimed it was a police recreation drawing from a witness description. Unfortunately, no other information about where exactly this image originally comes from has been found, but it quickly began to gain meme usage on 4chan. In 2004, Derrick Todd Lee was convicted for the murders of 7 women in the Baton Rouge area. He later became known as the Baton Rouge Serial Killer. Perhaps as equally terrifying as his crimes is the sketch police produced of him during the initial investigation. On March 10, 2007, at around midnight, a woman was seen in the hallways of Covenant Lakeside Hospital in Lubbock, Texas. This woman was described as an African American in her 20s dressed in hospital scrubs, although it was later revealed she did not actually work there. She entered the maternity ward and abducted a 2-day-old baby, and was last seen leaving the hospital with the baby at 12:30. Police were notified at 1:20, and the following sketch was released. Along with that, a manhunt and Amber Alerts in Texas and New Mexico ensued. The next day, the baby was found in 22-year-old Rayshaun Parson's possession at her home in Clovis, New Mexico. Rayshaun was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her crime. Zebb Quinn was a Walmart employee who disappeared in Asheville, North Carolina on January 2, 2000 after finishing his shift. Days after his disappearance, his car was found in a restaurant parking lot. A pair of lips and an exclamation point were drawn on the car's back window in lipstick, and along with that, a hotel key card, a jacket that did not belong to Zebb, and a live puppy were found inside. Witnesses later called police to report having seen Zebb's car being driven in downtown Asheville, and assisted police in producing this terrifying composite sketch of the woman they saw driving it. Investigators noted that the sketch bore resemblance to Misty Taylor, a woman who Zebb had been in a relationship with prior to his disappearance. Robert Jason Owens ended up being arrested for Zebb's murder in 2017, as he had been the last person to see Zebb alive after Zebb's Walmart shift. Zebb's remains have still not been found. This is a sketch of a serial child rapist who attacked 3 young girls in Melbourne, Australia through the late 80s and early 90s. He became known as Mr. Cruel. Police described him as highly intelligent, as he carefully planned each of his attacks by surveilling the victim and their families, and threw police off by leaving no forensic evidence and leaving red herrings. His attacks all consisted of him breaking into the victim's home in the early morning, armed with either a knife or gun and wearing a tailored balaclava. To this day, he has not been identified.